There's nothing more shirky than the pronunciation of the pronoun I. Shirk is to share. Sharaka means to share, to partake in something. A company, a sharika, in the Arabic language implies this idea of a body, parts that are joined together, individuals that are joined together, entities that are joined together to share in a body composed of parts. Each part is weak and unable, it's deficient on its own to attain the goal, the objective, the intention behind its movements. And each part has an ultimate share in the intention for which it moves. So, like a human being composed of parts, there is a singular entity, even if only in meaning, which holds the parts together, but it's a type of ishtirak, a partnership. It's a type of partnership. In order for each of these parts to endure towards the same goal, they need each other and they share in that. Now, what that does is it suggests that each part that's sharing in the same goal, sharing in each in the same initiative, it presupposes, it says that, well, before something shares, it has to exist, because sharing is nothing but a function, it's an activity, it's an action. In order for there to be an action, there must be an entity, an essence that shares, that acts. So the real partnership that shares in the being of the corporation, shares in the being of the company, the real sharing is that they all have this attribute of being. They all share in terms of their existence. They're independent in terms of their existence when they're not joined together in this company, but they participate in the same being when they do form this kind of sharika, this kind of company or body or a semblance of parts. And so, in that way, each thing must have the same kind of being in order to share like this. You can't put different kinds of being together to have the same action, the same activity, because activities, you see, for example, when a person who does something, they have many different actions that they do, but the actions that the human being does, even though the human being is composed of many parts, the activity that the human being does is unified. Acts themselves are unified. Activities are unified, even though the parts that commit the act are not unified. The finger is not the toes. And the proof of that is that if you were to remove someone's toes, may Allah save us, you'd still have a person. So even though if you remove the toe, eventually that toe will no longer exist. But at any rate, what you have in terms of a sharika, a partnership, is a union of parts aimed at achieving some kind of shared intention through a collaboration of activities. And that presupposes that those things must exist in the first place. So there's an outward sharing and an inward sharing. The outward sharing is in the movements of the corporation, or you can say of the body, which happens with human beings, or what happens with IBM or any of these Mac or any of these corporations. And then there's an inward sharing too, which is the sharing of being itself. They're all going to be and exist together in order to achieve some kind of goal. Now, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has no partner. He has nothing, no one shares with him. Well, it's obvious that we say that no one shares with him in his capacity to create. Okay, that's a given. No one shares with him with his capacity to give, to create, to inculcate, I guess the term would be death. And there's no giver of life but God. There's no giver of death but God. These are given. But on a second level, or on an inward level, the reason why shirk is not possible is because it presupposes the being of something. In order for someone to share with God, that thing has to exist. And if something has the capacity to share with God, then it must have the same kind of being as God, just like a corporation does. They must have the same kind of intention with God, the same kind of activity with God. They must be on the same level as God in order to be able to share with Him, which would mean that that entity that is sharing with God has an independent existence. And if its existence is independent and doesn't need God to give it existence, then itself is also a God. So it's not just a problem of attributes, but it's a problem of basic existence in the first place, appearance and existence, because the issue with creatures is that their existence is not essential to their being. They come in and out of existence, whereas Allah does not come in and out of existence. He always is, and He always was, and He always will be. So a creature that can just as easily not exist as does exist needs some kind of a cause to bring it into existence, therefore making it essentially deficient. So partnership with Allah is in fact impossible, because if something is going to be able to share in being with God, the first thing it's going to have is necessary existence, that it must exist and doesn't need a cause whatsoever. But there's nothing in creation like that at all. So a partnership with Allah is impossible, because that thing that would be sharing in whatever it is that Allah is doing would have to be strong enough to maintain its own existence, but it cannot. It looks towards God to maintain its existence, so therefore it doesn't have the same kind of being, and as such it cannot share with God in any of His activities. The problem with shirk, though, is that we presuppose, we say God has no partners. And what we mean by that is that yes, these things exist, but they don't share with God in His existence. But if we take it one step further, no, these things do not exist. Because existence is something that must be. It's not something that comes and goes. It's not a real existence. God's existence is real, and the existence of things that are not God is something that is contingent upon God's will. So not only is it impossible to associate a partner with God, it's impossible for there to be an associate with God, because that being would have to be independent and not something contingent upon His will. Nothing passing, nothing that comes and goes. But we all know that there's nothing in this world that's permanent, and everything is constantly passing, coming and going. None of them really are. They don't even have the attribute of being, really. Because just as easily as it is for them to leave, they can't be. Just as easily as it is for them to come, they go. So how do we really give any kind of attribute of being to these things? They're more like a mirage. Not a mirage per se, but more like that than not. Now the problem with the human being is that the human being presupposes, the human being thinks of himself as actually being. He doesn't see his potential. He doesn't see that he is or she is potentially acquiring being as they're going along in their life, but they think that they are actual, complete package. And they don't see their imkaniyya, they don't see their potentiality happening right in front of their eyes, but deem themselves, because of the ego, as being something actualized, something real. But there's nothing real about Allah. As a matter of fact, at the very essence of slavery itself is this idea that I don't even have my own being. It's something that Allah has to grant to me, just like He would my clothing, just like He would my food. This is the epitome of slavery. But somehow this slave, because of the nature of the world, forgets the nature of their would-be existence, and they forget about the reality of God's absolute existence. And instead of seeing themselves as merely as an indication of God, they see themselves as God, but not in so many words. I am, I can do, I make this, I make that, I am in charge. If I try harder, I can get to God. I want this, I want that. Every statement like this starts with the death blow of I. Even with Shaitan himself, didn't he say, Ana khayrun minhu, I am better than him. In order for Shaitan to be better than Adam, he would have had to presuppose his being as actual. And so in that sense, he was a mushtarik, a would-be partner with God, because he was assuming that he actually is. Whereas with Adam alayhi salam, everyone saw his creation. He was humiliated by that experience in the sense that he was brought low, that he could never claim anything like this. And everyone knew he knew nothing. And everyone knew he was made from nothing. What a blessing. Yet how soon we forget. So this word, I, it's probably, unanimously speaking, the shortest, most succinct word in all the English language. But what's behind it is going to fill every level of hellfire exhaustively. So the most dangerous, the most subtle expression in the English language is this word, I. And my and I use that word loosely, my challenge to you, and I use that word loosely, is to find the real ana, the real I, the one who said La ilaha illa ana, there is no God but I. Because if you find that I, it's the only way that your I will ever die. And as long as you and I refuse to find that I, you and I are just a lie. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.